Hello there and welcome to World News, coming to you live on All 24 News. Coming up next are the headlines. Algerian Foreign Minister Mr. Amtala participates in the proceedings of the 42nd Ordinary Session of the Executive Council of the African Union. Also ahead in our news, the Spanish Parliament approved a draft law granting Spanish citizenship to Sahrawis, dealing a serious blow to Morocco. Also ahead, the transitional Malian Prime Minister's visit to the Gao region embodies Bamako authorities' renewal of will to advance the peace and reconciliation agreement signed in Algiers. And NATO is stepping up support for Ukraine while further strengthening deterrence and defense and increasing stockpiles. Hello again and welcome to the program. First in our topical news, the Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune signed a presidential decree that includes the protocol of facilities for the completion of the land road link in Tindouf and Zouirat. Mariam Ziad has more.
Besides the existing good relations between Algiers and Nouakchott, the two neighbors are constantly strengthening their economic ties. The signing by the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, of a package of facilities and exemptions for the completion of the land road linking the southern province of Tindouf and the Mauritanian city of Zouirat constitutes the pinnacle of trade between the two countries. The two parties are committed to ensuring that the completion of all the project-related works are carried out through Algeria's funding, guaranteed by the Algerian Agency of International Cooperation for Solidarity and Development, in order to fund technical studies, supervision services, and road construction works. Algeria is responsible for identifying and submitting to Mauritania a list of necessary products to the completion of the project, while the latter is in charge of ensuring the safety of sites, people and goods in addition to granting authorizations and permits. Nouakchott is also committed to providing all technical and geological data to the study office and construction companies and granting permits to exploit resources, mines and construction materials required to implement this strategic and vital road access. In line with the strategic plan that aims to accelerate the pace of the project completion, the parties undertake to grant all exemptions from duties and fees for the acquisition of goods and services that are needed for the project. The new road linking North African to West African countries will have a great economic and social impact on the regional and continental level.
The Minister of Foreign Affairs and the National Community Abroad, Mr. Amtala held on Wednesday bilateral talks and meetings with several of his counterparts on the sidelines of his participation in the proceedings of the 42nd Ordinary Session of the Executive Council of the African Union taking place in the Ethiopian capital, Addis Ababa. The 42nd Ordinary Session of the Executive Council of the African Union kicked off with a call for increase in efforts to deepen continental integration and toward realizing Africa's development aspirations. Speaking to the Executive Council, AU Commission Chair Moussa Faki noted that although Africa is making progress, the continent is still or has still a long way to go after evaluating the implementation of the first 10 years of the AU's 50-year continental development agenda. An investigation by Forbidden Stories revealed that a Zionist disinformation agency had penetrated the media system and lobbying groups in France to promote the Makhzen regime's agenda on the Western Sahara issue. The investigation showed that the agency, run by former members of the army and intelligence services of the Zionist entity, stood behind the case of the journalist in the French channel BFM TV, Rachid Mbaraki. The Spanish Parliament approved by majority a draft law granting Spanish citizenship to all Sahrawis born before 1976. thus dealing a serious blow to the Moroccan occupation and confirming Spain's recognition of the Sahrawi people and Madrid's historical responsibility to the last settlement in Africa. Mohamed Khatil with more.
The Moroccan occupation has received yet again a strong slap after the Spanish parliament approved a draft law providing for the possibility of granting Spanish citizenship to all Sahrawis born before 1976 in what is described as a step that confirms the historical responsibility of Spain towards the last colony in Africa.
Actually, what the Sahrawi people have been expecting since 1975 up to now is the support for the right to a self-determination referendum and the inalienable right of the Sahrawi people to freedom and independence. As for this draft law and the particular timing related to its endorsement, it is important in a sense that it comes to reaffirm the legal and historical responsibility of Spain.
The draft law, submitted by the Podemos party to the Spanish Congress of Deputies with 168 votes in favor and 118 votes against from the Socialist Workers' Party, clearly confirms that the Spanish legislator makes a clear distinction between the Sahrawi and the Moroccan citizen. Spain, which is preparing for the holding of important elections this year, will put the fate of the government of current Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez and his party in the hands of the Spanish people as a result of committing many mistakes that plunged the country in an internal and external tension.
The Spanish government has admitted that it miscalculated the consequences of the turnaround in Madrid's position towards the Western Sahara issue and its support for the Moroccan regime's proposed autonomy plan on Spanish commercial exchanges and companies operating in Algeria. In this context, the Minister of Industry, Trade and Tourism, Maria Reyes Morato, informed Spanish companies which have branches in Algeria that the government had not studied well the consequences of changing its position on the Western Sahara issue and called on the companies concerned to leave Algeria or change the country, given the lack of solutions for that crisis. To neighboring Tunisia now, Tunisian President Mr. Qais Said described the figures in recent days as terrorists, accusing them of conspiring against state security. During a visit to the Interior Ministry headquarters, President Qais Said confirmed that many have tried to dismantle the state and are trying today in every way to inflame social conditions to achieve their obvious goals, and that they do not hesitate to fall into the arms of any foreign party.
نحن نعيش في مرحلة دقيقة وخطيرة.
We live in a delicate and dangerous phase. The charges are of conspiracy against the internal and external security of the state. We respect procedures and we respect human rights, and the matter has absolutely nothing to do with rights and freedoms, as those who have no conscience claim. We will not allow anyone to conspire against the state, because this aims to overthrow the state, and this is the goal of the project that they planned for.
The Tunisian president also called on judges to assume their historical responsibility in purifying the country from those he called conspirators against the state, stressing the need to respect the principle of fair trial and apply the law on everyone.
It's about state viability and people's future and the future of a whole nation. I wonder how they could mess with Tunisia, with its state and its people, whom they impoverished. The issue today is social and economic, and decisions must emanate from the popular will and not be dictated by third parties. More work is awaiting us, and today the Tunisian people is expecting us to assume our sacred duty in rescuing Tunisia and rescuing the Tunisian people. It's a responsibility. We are not asking anything for ourselves. And I have nothing personal with any of those people. It's about a state, a nation, and a sovereignty.
In another context, the Tunisian President Qais Said said that the recent series of arrests affected those he accused of starving Tunisians and plotting against the internal and external security of the state.
5% فقط من المواد.
only 5% of the goods enter the wholesale market in the capital, and the remaining 95% is pumped into illegal channels to abuse the Tunisian people. The aim of these paths is to monopolize, control prices, and starve. Documented confessions proving that these methods are related to fueling the social conditions in the country exists. Thank God Tunisian people are aware of all these conspiracies and practices.
الشعب التونسي على علم بكل هذه المؤامرات وبكل هذه الممارسات.
The Democratic Confederation of Labor in Morocco announced a new wave of protest against skyrocketing prices. The Confederation confirmed in a statement that the protest is aimed at facing up the government's silence towards the exceptional context that the kingdom is going through and the current government measures that won't lower prices. For its part, the National Union of Labor warned the government against its silence towards the suffering of Moroccans in general and the working class in particular, in light of the rising prices, growing unemployment, and deteriorating social and financial conditions. To a different story now. The United Nations has suggested that dozens of migrants may have died in their boat sinking off the coast of Libya, with only 7 survivors found so far. On Wednesday, the International Organization for Migration of the United Nations revealed that no less than 73 immigrants were missing, presumably after their boat crashed off the coast of Libya on Tuesday. The transitional Malian Prime Minister Shigol Kokala Maiga will visit the Gao region in the north of the country starting next Friday, which will last for 4 days. According to observers, the visit carries with it a renewal of the intention of Bamako authorities to advance the peace and reconciliation agreement signed in Algiers. Moving on now, President of the Transitional Government, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, affirmed that he remains committed to respecting the election schedule, a critical step towards restoring stability and democracy in Burkina Faso. Hossein Berkan with more.
Burkina Faso has been struggling with a serious security and humanitarian crisis for the past 7 years, which has hampered the country's ability to hold a free and fair elections. However, President of Transition, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, has confirmed his commitment to respecting the election schedule despite the challenges.
The head of state reassured us of his support and of the efforts that are currently being made in Burkina Faso to create a security climate favorable to the holding of free, transparent and fair elections, such as the Transition Charter.
In a recent communication from the presidency after submitting a report on the 2021 period, President Traoré assured that efforts are being made to create a secure environment for the conduct of transparent and fair elections, as envisioned in the Transition Charter. Eliseu Ouedraogo, a member of the National Independent Election Commission, CINI, echoed his sentiment, stating that the CINI's responsibility is not to decide when the elections will take place, but to ensure the proper organization of the process once the date has been set.
Ce rapport, évidemment, retrace la vie de notre institution.
The responsibility of the CINI is not to say when the elections will take place. Our responsibility is to work so that when it is said that the elections are taking place on such a date, we can be in a position to ensure the proper organization of this process and to provide the people of Burkina Faso with favorable conditions that allow to express themselves with regard to the choices which are proposed to them within the framework of the ballots which are projected.
Reçu de la part du chef de l'État.
The country has faced numerous security challenges in recent years, including attacks by terrorist groups, which have killed thousands and displaced millions. By ensuring that elections take place on schedule, the country can take a significant step toward addressing these challenges and paving the way for a more peaceful and prosperous future.
To Turkey-Syria file now. The death toll in Turkey and Syria after the tragic earthquake that hit both countries last Monday has now risen above 40,000. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said Tuesday that more than 35 people were killed That is, 35,000 people were killed in the 7.8 magnitude, making it the deadliest earthquake in Turkish history. Meanwhile, more than 5,500 deaths have been confirmed in neighboring Syria. The country is already in a difficult situation after a decade of war. It's been more than a week now since the massive earthquake hit Turkey and Syria, leaving thousands of people trapped under the rebels. Rescuers in Turkey pulled several more people alive from the rubble nearly 200 hours after a series of powerful earthquakes that struck the region. However, despite hope to find other survivors, experts warned the window is closing for finding more people alive in what remains collapsed buildings after so much time. Syrian President Mr. Bashar al-Assad welcomed any positive stance from Arab nations, including many that severed ties with Damascus. The official Syrian news agency Sana quoted al-Assad in his confirmation that the Syrian people welcome any positive stance towards them, especially from the Arab brothers, stressing the importance of bilateral cooperation between Syria and Jordan. Members of the Algerian Civil Protection or Civil Defense, I'm saying, dispatched in Turkey to participate in the search and rescue operation in the aftermath of the deadly earthquake that hit both Turkey and Syria, have returned to the country safe and sound. The team members were welcomed at the Bufarik Air Base by the Minister of Interior, Local Authorities and Urban Planning, Mr. Brahim Murad, who conveyed to them the congratulations of the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, for the tremendous work accomplished as part of their humanitarian mission. Palestinian prisoners in the prisons of the Zionist entity began on Wednesday to carry out a disobedience act in protest against the occupation's measures aimed at harassing them. A joint statement issued by the Palestinian Nadi al-Asir and the Prisoners' Affairs Commission stated that the disobedience steps will be open until the date set for the hunger strike scheduled for the 1st of next Ramadan. The initial disobedience steps include closing sections, obstruction, the so-called security check, and wearing brown clothes imposed by the prison administration as a message to escalate confrontation and the prisoners' readiness for that. NATO defense ministers on Wednesday gathered in Brussels for the second day of a meeting expected to focus on military spending targets, with some allies questioning whether the current goal of 2% of GDP is sufficient with the war raging in Ukraine. Nabil Khazini in this report.
What's that?
Ahead of the gathering, the Ukrainian defense minister waved a handkerchief showing a military jet. Ukraine has repeatedly asked for help from its Western allies, and this moment in particular, Kiev is calling for jets. It is the 9th time that NATO defense ministers gather in Brussels to discuss ways to supply Ukraine with more weaponry. But for the Secretary General of the alliance, the planes Ukraine is asking for are not the priority. The priority is to increase defense spending above their previous target.
What is obvious is that if it was right to commit to spend 2% in 2014, it is even more right now, because we live in a more dangerous world. There is a full-fledged war going on.
In Ukraine, meanwhile, the Swedish Prime Minister said that fighting vehicles and anti-tank weapons his country has promised will together make a significant contribution to Ukraine's combat power.
And I can assure you that Sweden will continue to provide as much support as is possible, politically, economically and militarily. Our latest military support package is testament to this.
With the war in Ukraine nearing its one-year anniversary, Kiev says it needs more powerful armament. Russia warns countries supplying Ukraine with more powerful weapons risk their own destruction.
Representatives of the 27 European Union countries met in Brussels on Wednesday to discuss a new batch of sanctions against Russia, which the head of the bloc's executive said could cost 11 billion euros in lost trade.
Avec 9 paquets de sanctions en place, l'économie russe régresse.
With 9 packages of sanctions in place, the Russian economy is going backwards. And to keep up this strong pressure, we are proposing a 10th package of measures with new trade bans and technology export controls to Russia. This package is worth a total of 11 billion euros. We propose, among other things, export restrictions on multiple electronic components used in Russian armed systems, such as drones, missiles and helicopters.
Tels que les drones, les missiles, les hélicoptères.
Ursula von der Leyen also revealed the European Union's intention to impose sanctions on Iran due to allegations about Tehran's support for Russia during its military operation in Ukraine. During the plenary session of the European Parliament in Strasbourg on Wednesday, von der Leyen said that she hopes that the European Union member states will agree to a new package as a part of a series of joint sanctions prepared by the G7 countries to coincide with the first anniversary of the war in Ukraine, explaining that the move targets entities and institutions related to the Iranian Revolutionary Guards.
Ces drones iraniens.
These Iranian-made drones kill Ukrainian civilians. This is atrocious. So, for the first time, we are also proposing to sanction Iranian entities, including those linked to Iran's Revolutionary Guard. It is our duty to sanction them.
Sanctionner cela.
2 agencies at the United Nations made an appeal to raise $5.6 billion to support the Ukrainians most affected by the war. The humanitarian response plan for Ukraine, which includes hundreds of local Ukrainian organizations in seeking $3.9 billion in funding, while the refugee response plan for refugees from Ukraine called for $1.7 billion.
We're asking today for $3.9 billion for this year's humanitarian response plan in Ukraine. Over 11 million people are targeted by this response plan.
The refugee component of what we launched today is $1.7 billion for this year. It is very complementary to what is being done. That's why we're launching the 2 appeals together. It concerns 10 countries.
On Wednesday, the European Union countries began applying the mechanism of capping wholesale prices for natural gas imported to the bloc countries in the event of a sharp rise in prices in the future, at a time when the producing countries warned of the repercussions of the measure, which they described as unilateral, destabilizing the energy markets and threatening investment in the sector. In a surprise announcement, Scottish First Minister Nicola Sturgeon and leader of the National Party announced her resignation, declaring that after almost a decade in office, she was exhausted. The First Minister said she would remain in office until her successor was elected. She is the longest-serving First Minister and the first woman to hold the position.
And so today I am announcing my intention to step down as First Minister and leader of my party. I have asked the National Secretary of the SNP to begin the process of electing a new party leader, and I will remain in office until my successor is elected.
And with this, our program comes to an end. For more, visit our social media platforms. That's it for me. Thank you for watching, and bye for now.